Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website at weather.gov/Alaska, and you can also call our weather info line 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to our forecast or watch warnings or advisories on either of those means. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll start off with a quick look at an avalanche warning that the Chugach National Forest Avalanche Center has out, and that is in effect until 6 a.m. on Wednesday, when they will update that again. We'll see if they put it or keep it going or let that one go. But right now we have for the Turnagain Pass area, Kenai Mountains, and Western Chugach Mountains, all three we have high levels of danger for any level of the mountains, anywhere below 1,000 feet all the way to above 2,500 feet. So if you're out trying to recreate in those areas, please be advised and be very careful, as again, the Chugach National Forest Avalanche Center has issued an avalanche warning for those areas. Taking a look at the watches, warnings, and advisories that we have out for this state, we'll start with the snow band that is extending down from the YK Delta up through the Yukon Valley up towards the eastern parts of the Brooks Range, and we're continuing to see a lot of snow dump in those areas. Some of the more interior locations towards Galena area are seeing a lot of snow, so they have a winter weather advisory out for snow. As we get further towards the Brooks Range, we are seeing a lot of wind with that snow, so we're seeing winter weather advisories for blowing snow, reducing visibilities down to 1/2 mile. And then as we get down towards the Yukon Delta area, some more areas of blowing snow there. All of these are valid until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, all through this corridor. So we get down towards the Bethel area, we actually have a blizzard warning out for areas to the west of Bethel along the Kuskokwim Delta coastline there. And that is going to be out until 9 p.m. Tonight. Or rather, that one will also be out until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Again, that is west of Bethel. As you look up along the west coastline, we have blowing snow advisory for the Shishmaref, Kivalina areas. That will be out until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Then we have a winter storm warning for the areas from Tin City down towards Gamble area and St. Lawrence Island. That is dropping conditions down to blizzard conditions with 1/4 mile visibility. And that is out actually until 6 a.m. on Thursday. So where most of these are out until 6 a.m. Wednesday, the one for St. Lawrence Island out until 6 a.m. on Thursday. And as we look out towards the eastern parts of the Alaska Range, winter storm warning there. Again, conditions with the blowing snow dropping down to 1/4 mile visibility. That is out until midnight tonight. And then a wind advisory for the Delta Junction area, and that is out until midnight tonight as well. Taking a look now out over our southwest coastline in the Bristol Bay area, we have winter weather advisory for snow. That is out until 9 p.m. and then a blizzard warning for the Pribilof Islands, also out until 9 p.m. Again, you can check our weather info line if you want to call in, or our website, getting more updates to these warnings if those are your areas. Taking a look at our satellite imagery, we'll start off in the east as we can watch our first system way out to the east come up from the south, bringing in a lot of the warmer air that's transitioned over all the precip in the Panhandle area to rain. As we watch this again, we can watch one of our lows push out over the state, bringing that band of precipitation where we're seeing all that snow fall out, extending up towards Arctic Village, down towards the Bethel area. And that's going to start to stall out there, continuing to bring snow to the area, slowly pushing off towards the west. So you look again, we'll take a look now out over the eastern Bering Sea, where our main low is kind of setting up here in the Bristol Bay and Alaska Peninsula area. And that's going to bring a lot of the northerly flow that's bringing in some of the low clouds. You can see in the background there a lot of snow and a lot of winds with that northerly flow coming throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. So as we look at our weather for the remainder of the day, you can see a lot of those snow showers with that northerly flow coming in, especially as we get on the Bering side of the Aleutian Islands. Going to see a lot more snow coverage there. Some winds moving through these locations, but the blowing snow concerns are for the Pribilof Islands with that blizzard warning out until 9 p.m. tonight, and also along the coastline of the YK Delta, seeing that blowing snow. As that snow band that we saw in satellite imagery, you can see it here extending out from the YK Delta area through central parts of the interior and then up towards the eastern parts of the Arctic coastline. Again, as we get closer towards the Brooks Range, you're going to see some blowing snow in there. And then along the west coast, down by St. Lawrence Island, seeing some new snow and blowing snow conditions there, and some lighter snow showers up as we get closer towards the Barrow area. Down in the south central, we're seeing rain come in, but that's primarily staying on the Gulf Coast side. Not a lot of action making it past the coastal ranges until we get up towards the Alaska Range, where we are going to see some snow. And then in the eastern parts of the Alaska Range, some blowing snow conditions out there. Down in the Panhandle, seeing a lot of rain this afternoon. That's going to continue through the evening hours. And as we move into the nighttime period, the low that was in the Gulf is now pushing up towards the Prince William Sound area, continuing to bring warm enough air for the Panhandle area to stay mostly rain, but as we get further away from the Gulf, we're going to see more snow, especially at higher elevations. Similarly, in Prince William Sound area along the Gulf Coast, going to see some rain, but as we get a little bit further inland, throughout the south central, going to see a lot of snow coverage in that area. So we move up into the interior parts of the state, seeing those blowing snow conditions last again until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And as we get up on the Arctic coastline, seeing more snow up there. Western parts of the Arctic coastline, some snow, but as we get down further to the south towards Kivalina, we are going to see some blowing snow conditions, and those blowing snow conditions are going to continue in a corridor down towards St. Lawrence Island. Snow all along the west coast, dropping down to the YK Delta area. Snow in Bristol Bay as well, as we have our main low here sitting over the Alaska Peninsula, just continuing to bring moisture and cold air, resulting in a lot of snow for Kodiak Island all around the low throughout the Bering and Aleutian Islands. As we move into Wednesday, the low has just slowly tracked off to the south and east, and that's going to bring continued northerly flow for the Bering and Aleutians, more snow showers for those locations, bringing more moisture up towards Kodiak Island, more snow there, Bristol Bay, YK Delta area as well, extending out towards the Galena area, that snow band. But as we get closer towards the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island area, not a lot of new snow. However, there is still enough wind with the snow that has recently fallen to continue to have blowing snow conditions. Along the Arctic coastline from Dead Horse further off to the east, going to see some snow there. Down in much of the interior, going to see snow into the south central as well. And warm enough still on Wednesday for the Panhandle area to see rain. But again, as we move further away from the Gulf, going to see that mix more with snow. That will stay true on Thursday as well. However, it will be a lot lighter precipitation on Thursday as this weak ridging is trying to push into the area. As we move out towards the south central area, primarily snow, but as we get closer to the Gulf, some areas could be warm enough to see some rain. And as we move now towards the Bristol Bay area, our low is sitting there kind of over the Aleutian Range, bringing in more snow to the Bristol Bay area, YK Delta area, Kodiak Island. We have snow extending up over the eastern parts of the Norton Sound area, up through the central Brooks Range and throughout much of the Arctic coastline east of Barrow. And then as we move down into the Bering Sea, lighter northerly flow still going to bring in snow showers, not as much wind, and then we're going to have that continue throughout the Aleutian Islands. Taking a look at our temperatures now, we'll start off in the Panhandle area. In the mid-40s this afternoon at 2 p.m. Lower 40s for much of the south central. However, we did have Glen Allen get up to 51 degrees this afternoon at 2 p.m. Warmest in the state. For interior parts of the state, Fairbanks area and areas to the south and east with those winds, they are seeing some warmer temperatures into the mid-30s to mid-40s. But as we move away from that area to the west and north in the teens, below zero all along the Arctic coastline with Dead Horse the coldest -15 this afternoon. Single digits in the Kotzebue Sound area, in the teens for the most part for the Norton Sound area. Taking us to the southwest part of the state, YK Delta in the teens, mid-20s for the Bristol Bay area and Alaska Peninsula. Mid-20s to the upper 20s, getting into the eastern Aleutian Islands there, 29 degrees, and then just above freezing for the central Aleutian Islands, right at freezing for Shimia, and then in the low 20s for the Pribilof Islands. Lows tonight dropping down to 20 degrees for the Pribilof Islands, right around 30 degrees for the Aleutian Islands, in the teens for the Bristol Bay area, single digits throughout the YK Delta area. Seward Peninsula dropping down below zero, down around -20 for much of the locations along the Arctic coastline. Again, Dead Horse the coldest, -24. Single digits throughout much of the interior as we get closer to the south central, lows rising up into the mid-20s. And then along the Gulf Coast, we have mid-30s there, right around 40 degrees lows for tonight for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow into the lower to mid-40s for the Panhandle. Just above freezing for much of the south central. However, Glen Allen being the warmest today is going to only get up to around 25 degrees for tomorrow. In the southeastern parts of the interior, getting up into the 20s, but as we get further off to the west and north, going to only get up into the single digits until we get north of the Brooks Range, only going to get up into the negative teens. As we move down the west coast of the state, Kotzebue Sound area going to get up to the single digits in the minus, and then as we get over the other side of the Seward Peninsula and the Norton Sound, going to get into the positive single digits, into the teens for the YK Delta area, up to right around 30 degrees for the Bristol Bay area, and then just above freezing for the Aleutian Islands, with the Pribilofs only getting up to 22 for a high tomorrow. Taking a look at our aviation forecast now, starting off with our flying weather in the morning. Widespread MVFR and IFR conditions out over the Bering Sea with those lower ceilings that they're seeing out there and the snow mixing in. With our systems pushing up all that moisture along the Gulf Coast, going to see some MVFR and IFR conditions. A lot of snow along the Alaska Range, bringing in lower conditions there as well. And our snow band bringing MVFR and IFR conditions all the way up to the Arctic coastline. Then in the afternoon, some of that's going to clear out, especially for the Brooks Range there, but we are seeing more widespread MVFR and IFR conditions over the south central and out over the Panhandle. Bering Sea going to continue to see under that northerly flow MVFR and IFR conditions. Taking a look now at our passes, Anaktuvik will start off IFR, improve all the way to VFR, but it should be mentioned that tomorrow night they will drop back down. Similarly for Adigan Pass, IFR conditions improving to VFR, but tomorrow night expecting those conditions to drop back down again. Lake Clark and Merrill should both be IFR throughout the day tomorrow. Rainy Pass will start off IFR and improve to MVFR conditions. Windy Pass should stay MVFR throughout the day, as well as Isabel Pass. Mentasta Pass also expected to be marginal flight conditions for tomorrow. Tanita Pass should stay IFR for the entire day, as well as Portage and Chilkoot and White. We can look at our freezing levels and see some of that warmer air coming up over the Panhandle area, which is one of the big reasons why they're seeing some of that rain, where the other areas, surface freezing line staying well to the south, is bringing in a lot of snow from most locations around the state. Icing starting off in the Panhandle area between 3,000 and 8,000 feet. Out over the main part of the state between 5,000 and 10,000 feet. Huge area covered with that front pushing in and bringing a lot of cloud cover and snow to the areas above 12,000 feet along the Arctic coastline, and between 1,000 and 5,000 feet for much of the central Aleutian Islands, extending out towards Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula areas. Our jet for tomorrow, main core of the jet at 180 knots is well to the south. Not a lot of activity over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. We do have one jet streak coming up out of the Gulf at about 60 knots out of a southerly direction. And then just off the Arctic coastline, we have westerly jet at about 60 knots. And then to the southeast of the Panhandle, strong jet there, 140 knots. Taking us to 9,000 feet, southerly flow for much of the Panhandle area. Most of the stronger winds are staying off to the east, but 20 to 35 knots out of that southerly direction. Out over the state, southern parts are seeing the strongest winds at 35 knots, and then dropping down to 10 to 20 knots as we get over the northern parts of the state. Out over the Bering, northerly flow, strongest out here by St. Matthew Island, around 45 knots. And then on the southern side of the low, seeing winds get up to as high as 45 knots, but dropping down to 30 knots as they move over Kodiak Island. At 3,000 feet, we have our flow again out of a northerly direction out over much of the Bering Sea. Strongest here coming out of the Bering Strait area at about 50 knots, but dropping down to 35 over the Pribilofs, and then 25 as we get over the eastern Aleutian Islands. Still strong again on the southern side of the low, 50 knots there, dropping down to 35 as we move over Kodiak Island. Southerly flow over much of the southern part of the state, around 35 knots there, becoming easterly and dropping down to around 20 knots out over the main part of the state, and the northerly flow around 15 knots over the Arctic coastline. Out over the Panhandle area, winds pretty calm, about 5 knots there. For our turbulence, nothing out over the Panhandle as would be expected with those lighter winds. Kodiak Island area over towards Bristol Bay, below 5,000 feet expected tomorrow. And then in the stronger core, winds pushing through the Bering Strait area down towards St. Lawrence Island, below 5,000 feet expected. And then some turbulence out over the eastern Aleutian Islands, below 4,000 feet. If you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Cherry.
And I'm Forrest Kirst, a commercial pilot.
And today we're going to talk about an experiment we're doing using a small aircraft where we've mounted a sensor package to the aircraft to measure temperature, humidity, and pressure, as well as elevation and longitude and latitude of the airplane. And with the package, we're going to sample the local winter inversion here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And an inversion is where you have the surface atmosphere that's closest to the land is colder than the atmosphere above it, which is the opposite of normal conditions throughout the year throughout North America. Forrest, maybe you could tell us more about how a pilot experiences an inversion during the wintertime.
On the ground during our pre-flight, it's very cold out. This morning it's minus 28 centigrade, which is about minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So doing our pre-flight, it's extremely cold, hard on the airplane, hard on the people. For flying at the colder temperatures for doing these experiments, we're somewhere between minus 20 and minus 40 degrees. So we have to dress for that temperature inside the airplane as well as when we're outside of the airplane. When we're doing our pre-flight, we have to be extremely careful not to damage the plastic parts on the outside of the airplane. Extremely careful not to touch the metal parts with our fingers because we'll get contact frostbite. And we have to be real careful just with everything because it's just so cold. We have to dress as if we're going to be outdoors the whole time, and we use the aircraft heater to make it comfortable in our clothes and so we can see out the window. When we get the airplane running and we do our takeoff roll, we have increased engine performance and increased lift because of the colder, denser air. So we get off the ground earlier and have a better climb rate. When we reach the inversion layer, quite often the windows will fog up. The airplane's performance will decrease slightly because it's warmer air, produces less lift, and it produces less power from the engine.
When an inversion is present, air doesn't move anywhere, especially it doesn't want to move up. And so the classic look there is the steam out of the power plant or automobile exhaust, any kind of wood smoke or such, will come out of a chimney and then just flatten out and not move up. And if it moves horizontally at all, it's very slow, just creeping along. When you see that kind of lack of air movement, especially when there's clear skies, the sun is maybe low on the horizon, that is an inversion day in interior Alaska.
The reason it is so cool in the far north during winter is that the incoming radiation is at such a low angle. Now, as the atmosphere begins to cool in late fall, we start to get snowfall, which causes the land surface to be white, and light colors reflect incoming radiation right back, which causes additional cooling. And it's the reason we have a persistent inversion from late fall through early spring here in Fairbanks.
To get a radiation inversion to form, you need clear or mostly clear skies. You need no wind or very little wind down at the surface. And you need to have the sun under the horizon or high noon in December such that even if the sun is up, it's so low it doesn't really feed in any energy. When those three things happen, you lose heat to space from the surface of the Earth, but you're not getting any new heat in, and you get a very cold layer of air hugging the ground, cold, dense air that just lays down in the bottom of the valley. That's the classic radiation inversion setup.
So as we do our experiment with the aircraft, we're going to use a similar instrumentation package as is mounted on the standard weather balloons. We're going to measure temperature profiles, relative humidity, and pressure. And we're also going to tie the sensor package into a GPS unit, a global positioning system unit, so we know where the aircraft is located relative to the topography. So now I want to tell you about the instrument package that we're using on the aircraft. First of all, we use a NiCad 12-volt battery to power the data logger and the instruments. The data logger records the output from the meteorological sensors, which here include a temperature and relative humidity sensor and a pressure transmitter, which works like a barometer to measure atmospheric pressure. This particular one is going to plug into the static port in the aircraft, which also helps power some of the aircraft instruments. Finally, we have the global positioning system computer, which measures the latitude, longitude, and altitude of the aircraft. This one has an accuracy of about 10 meters, which is perfectly fine for what we're trying to do here. Here's a picture of our temperature and relative humidity sensor installed on the aircraft. So this is an FAA approved plate here mounted to the window. And we want the temperature sensor mounted towards the aft of the aircraft so we don't get air rushing in and it has a chance to equilibrate to the environmental conditions. And then finally, our pressure sensor is connected to this static port in the airplane, which again just measures the ambient pressure of the atmosphere where it hits this little hole in the plane. That's piped back into our pressure sensor inside. So one of the things that we're going to go out and do today is that we're going to attach the sensor package to the aircraft, and then Forrest is going to take off from Fairbanks International.
To get repeatability for the data, we flew in and out of Fairbanks International, Nenana Airport, Ladd Army Airfield, and Eielson Airfield. So we do a very slow climb up through the inversion layer, climbing at about 100 feet per minute. Just very slow climb to the top of the inversion, find out where the ceiling is, and then once we're at the ceiling of the inversion, we do very slow porpoising up and down through the inversion to see if it's stable, if it's got different characteristics throughout it. Then we get to the next airport and we do a very slow descent into the airport at about 100 feet per minute, all the way to the ground.
Welcome back. We'll start off with a quick look at the ice edge. We have ice moving down now from St. Matthew Island out not quite towards the Pribilof Islands yet and down through Bristol Bay. And it's important to note that over the next couple days we're going to have that consistent northerly flow, and we are expecting the ice edge to expand out 10 to 15 nautical miles a day as we continue to have that northerly flow there. So it will continue to approach the Pribilof Islands and expand out through much of the northern and eastern parts of the Bering Sea. However, out over the Cook Inlet area, we have ice now south of Callaghan Island, but as we're getting some of that warmer air, we are expecting some of that ice to degrade over the next couple of days before it gets cold enough again for that ice to regrow. Taking a look now at our marine forecast for the southeastern part of the state. Westerly flow 25 to 30 knots out over the Gulf. Southerly flow 20 to 25 knots in the inside waters. Then on Thursday, primarily switching to a northerly direction, inside waters 15 knots, getting up to 25 knots as we get further to the south, 20 to 25 knots out over the eastern parts of the Gulf. As we look out over the south central area, flow southerly direction out over the Gulf, 30 to 35 knots, southerly flow out in Prince William Sound at 25 knots as well. And then through Shelikof Strait area, easterly flow 25 knots, becoming more southerly as we get up into the Cook Inlet area. Seas as high as 16 feet out over the Gulf. Then on Thursday, still going to see a lot of the southerly flow out over the Gulf, around 30 knots there, with seas as high as 17 feet now. As we get into Cook Inlet area, northeasterly flow 25 knots, with seas as high as 7 feet in ice-free waters. And then Shelikof Strait, going to see southwesterly flow 25 knots there. For the Alaska Peninsula, we can actually see the circulation moving around our low pressure system, 30 knots out over in areas to the east, but in areas that have the northerly flow, we are going to see some freezing spray. As we get on the Pacific side, it's going to stay mostly along the coastline. And then we have out over Bristol Bay area, 20 knots there. On Thursday, becoming northwesterly and then west as we get out towards Shelikof Island, all around 20 knots with the highest seas on the Pacific side up to as high as 10 feet. Wednesday for the Aleutian Islands, primarily northwesterly flow, 25 to 30 knots. The only freezing spray areas, though, are to the north of the eastern Aleutian Islands. As we get out towards the Shimya area, we are going to see northeasterly flow around 15 knots there. Seas only getting up to as high as about 12 or 13 feet as we get towards the central Aleutian Islands. Then on Thursday, a lot of northeasterly flow for the central and western Aleutians, 15 to 20 knots there, and then northerly flow as we get further off towards the east around 20 knots. Seas only getting up to as high as around 10 feet on the Bering side. Northerly flow along the west coast, strongest up towards St. Lawrence Island area, 40 knots there, getting down to around 25 knots as we get south of Nunavik Island, and freezing spray pretty much anywhere that is not covered in ice. Then on Thursday, we are going to continue to have northerly flow around 30 knots now, and again, freezing spray everywhere that is not in ice. Along the Arctic coastline, where everything is in ice, northerly flow there, 10 knots for the most part until we get down close towards the Kotzebue Sound area, 25 to 30 knots, and out towards Kaktovik, around 25 knots there. Then on Thursday, switching up, becoming all northerly flow around 10 knots along the Arctic coastline, along the west coast of the state, 20 to 30 knots, stronger as we get closer towards the Bering Strait. Quick recap out over the state, our main low pressure system bringing a lot of snow and winds to the area. We have snow showers throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, some strong blowing snow conditions bringing blizzard conditions through 9 p.m. for the Pribilof Islands, snow throughout southwest Alaska, strong snow until around 9 p.m. tonight for the Bristol Bay area, blowing snow conditions for the YK Delta area lasting until midnight tonight, or 6 a.m. tomorrow morning rather. Snow continuing out through much of the interior with a lot of snow out over the eastern Brooks Range. Winds out there as well, blowing snow conditions until 6 a.m. tomorrow. Blowing snow conditions also through the Bering Strait area down through St. Lawrence Island, with a winter storm warning extending out till 6 a.m. on Thursday for the area. Snow throughout much of the south central, and warm enough for rain for the panhandle locations. Expecting to see some snow further inland. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.